All right. So today on searching for happy, I'm with my new friend Ruben Villasenor. And Ruben, thanks so much for taking part in the podcast.
You bet. You bet. I'm happy to help, happy to inform. I love talking to people and just trying to, present education and educational material.
Yeah, and exactly. And that's what we're going to talk about. Ruben has an interesting background because Ruben is a cannabis coach, and he also was a founder of a CBD company, which he sold. And now he focuses his attention on helping and educating people on the benefits of the plant marijuana or cannabis. So, Ruben, tell us a little bit about you, your backstory, and how you got involved in this field.
Sure. So it was just kind of in like I like to say, in a former life, I have 40 years now of retail background, and the majority of that 20 years of that has been in the pet industry. And I had a business that dealt mostly primarily with independent pet stores for dog treats and dog toys.
Mm.
And I happened to be in a warehouse, one of those small warehouses, and I had a neighbor. And then we both ended up closing down our businesses approximately the same time. And he went off and said, "Hey," he basically asked me, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I got to go find a job." And I'm like, "What are you going to do?" And he goes, "Oh, I don't know." And as we were chatting and closing our businesses, he's like, "Hey, I have a friend who's been growing marijuana cannabis in Colorado since I knew him in high school. And he's telling me that he's switching from cannabis to hemp. And this new 2014 bill, and at the time it was 2018, was going to be the thing of the future. And I should get into it." And I'm like, "Okay, well, good luck with that." Anyway, things happened as they will, and I kept in touch with him, and I would go over and help him while I was furiously thinking I was going to go get a job. And he kept on asking me, "It's like, are you sure you don't just come out, just go sell some of this stuff on your day off?" I'm like, "No, no, no, I'm going to get a job." And two things, just one plus one plus one, finally convinced me to go out with him. And I'm like, "Oh, sure, I can sell this." I'm like, "I've been doing this for 30 years, except that before it was a dog toy or a rope or some type of biscuit." I'm like, "Let me just do a little research on what this CBD stuff is." And I never went back. I stopped doing it. My wife said, "Okay, you can do this if you can make the mortgage."
Yeah, yeah.
And I didn't do it the first time, but the first month, but it was pretty close. And she's like, "Well, how long, how many days have you done this?" And I said, "Well, I went out like partial, like for 2 weeks." And she goes, "Well, okay, then do it." And we did. And then I had some money and he needed some money to expand, and we became partners and grew the business. And then in 2022, basically, I sold my shares saying, "Hey, I've invested enough. I'd like to withdraw some money."
Hmm.
And I stayed on with the company, and it's still very successful, and we're still great partners. It's just they've gone off to do their thing, and I've decided, I'm tired of driving 12, 15 hours a day, and I'm going to stay a little bit more closer to home, but still in the industry and helping people.
Hmm. How
So
long ago? Yeah, how long
go
ago
ahead.
did you start the business?
So literally, 2018 is when I started the
2018.
when
Okay.
we started the CBD company. Yeah.
Okay.
And
And
then
and
go ahead.
cannabis was legal at that time out there, and you're in California.
We're in California, so cannabis had been legal, though our company was a hemp-based company.
Okay.
So in California, and then it seems like in the rest of the United States, there is a legal distinction. So if a plant is more than 0.3% THC by dry weight, that is classified as cannabis or marijuana, and if it's below, it's classified as hemp.
Okay.
And the best analogy I
Interesting.
can come with is like, if you like hot peppers and you go to your pepper plant and you grab a pepper and it's like kind of mild,
Yeah.
and even though it might be a habanero pepper plant, it's producing mild habaneros, then that's considered hemp. And if you grab a pepper and it's producing really spicy ones, that's considered marijuana, but it's
Hmm.
still the same plant.
What makes it spicy in
The
marijuana?
THC.
The THC is the spice.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, because so the difference in cannabis and hemp is only the level of THC.
Correct. So it is a legal distinction, not a botanical distinction.
Okay, can you grow hemp,
Yes,
which has limited THC?
correct.
You can.
Yes,
Okay, and then cannabis is typically grown with, I guess, I don't even know what the language would be but a larger percentage of THC or whatever the natural.
correct.
Okay.
Correct. And so I don't know if I'm a little bit of a pepperhead, so I love hot, spicy things. And like things, cultivators have grown peppers that are significantly hotter than the original one that they found growing in in the wild, let's say, or wherever they happen to be growing it. And so that's kind of what's happened to cannabis. Wherever it was originally grown, it was much closer to hemp. It was low in THC and high in CBD, which is what hemp is. And then by cultivating, because people desired the THC effect, by cultivating the plants, they got to a hotter, spicier, or higher concentrations of THC. And so now we have plants that are significantly higher and almost have outstripped the CBD in them. And now cultivators are backwards engineering to get back to the original plant, and they call that hemp.
Okay. All right. And so you're in your company that you started, you guys worked with hemp products as well as cannabis products, and then my next question, did you sell a variety of like you know, gummies are very popular and oils are very popular. Those are the products that you promoted?
Correct. And so we did not delve into the cannabis because we didn't have a cannabis license.
Mm.
But that is like literally that has changed earlier this year. But we were able to make all the traditional things. So we made creams and we made oils or tinctures and gummies, bath bombs, chapsticks, just about a variety of things. And then and some things we've stopped making since they weren't as popular as we thought, and just kind of stuck back to the basics. But yes, we had a full line of products, all doing similar, almost identical things. It's just the way, I mean, the difference really is just how you would like to consume it.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, like my wife, she can't do olive oil tasting because it gags her.
Mm-hmm.
So for people that do that, an oil tincture is not going to be for you. Maybe you need a gel cap or a gummy.
Gotcha.
Correct. Yeah. And so this just kind of depends on how that works.
Okay. All right. So then you sold the company and now you are focusing on becoming a cannabis coach. What does a cannabis coach do?
Correct. So the Cannabis Coach is the bridge between either a dispensary or a CBD store or a CBD product, and how you are going to use it and how it's going to interact in your lifestyle, including any other medications you take. And so it's just a more detailed, so it has a lot to do with a normal, typical health coach. So if you want to do a lifestyle change, it's going to be some behavior modification, some dietary changes, possibly some lifestyle changes to get where you want to go. And if we're talking about sleep or insomnia, that's a really big part of it.
Okay.
And like I said, and that would be the bridge. So you could go to a dispensary and they may be able to say, well, here's something I think might work, but they're not allowed to really give you any more direction than that. And so, like, do you go home? Is like, okay, do I take this at 2:00 in the afternoon? Do I take it at 4:00? It's like, how do I do this? And like, what happens if like at 3:00 I have to take my diabetes medicine, or I got to take my insulin shot, or I got to do cholesterol medication? How is that going to interact? And so that's where I would step in, or somebody like me would come in and say, okay, let's see what you got. Let's look and do a little research on what medications do with what, and then we can give you a protocol on how to safely take your medication or your cannabis to achieve the result you want.
Okay. And that's great. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so here's the thing. So there's a lot of plant medicines that are coming to the forefront. As we know, cannabis kind of led the way, and now we see a lot of psychedelics, and DMT type, um, uh, you know,
Correct.
coming to the
Yes.
forefront as well to help people really heal areas of anxiety, depression, but also sleep. People are constantly looking for something for sleep. And I was reading, that they estimate that there's like 70 million people that have a sleep disorder in the United States alone. And some say that that's off. It's even more. So if we have 300 million, a little bit more than that in the United States, it potentially could be a third of the population is struggling frequently with insomnia or some form of sleep disorder. And a lot of people, there was a lot of excitement around cannabis and what in CBD when it first came out, because people thought, oh, good, this is something natural. It's coming from a plant. I need to try it to see if it works. I am one of them. I dove on that bandwagon, but I have yet to find anything that has any level of consistency that can put me to sleep. In fact, most of them have an opposite effect with me. So even the ones that are designed for sleep, like gummies or the CBD gummies with the melatonin and whatever else they put in it, it keeps me up at night. So it wasn't a good, and I've tried some oils too. There's a CVN oil that did not work. I have that somewhere. I have all these things of tinctures of oil and CBD gummy things that I don't even use because they just kept me up, and it just. So my question is, Ruben, you definitely would qualify as an expert in this field. I mean, can this product help people deal with anxiety, levels of stress and anxiety, and can it help them sleep better?
The answer is yes. So the answer is yes, definitely from anecdotal evidence, but there's now starting to come in some scientific data that is also confirming that. Um, Sleep is such a big topic. I guess is like my question is like, where would you like me to start? I mean, I can kind of give you the breakdown on where and how it works, and you would probably be able to fold in any of the psychedelics, the DMTs, within this, not in a general sense, not a specific sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm getting, I like to just dive right in. I mean,
Sure.
how does cannabis help people with sleep? I mean, there's so many different strains out there. There's so many different companies out there, and a lot of them are selling. It appears to be the same product, but many of them just don't work. So my question for you is, I mean, what do people that suffer with insomnia, what do they need to look for in a gummy or CBD that could potentially be effective and the answer to this issue that they have?
Sure. Okay. Well, let's start there. So what I always would recommend would be a full spectrum based product. And full spectrum is basically defined as everything that's in the plant. So if the plant has 100 different cannabinoids, you will get 100 or 98 plus cannabinoids, with the majority. So the majority is probably going to be CBD, CBG, maybe some CBC, and then some THC. And then after that, you're talking about microscopic amounts of the other cannabinoids. But basically, you're getting this whole plant extract or product, as opposed to what's called an isolate base, where they've literally extracted or boiled down everything and eliminated everything except for one molecule.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is much more akin to how modern pharmaceuticals are made. they give you the one molecule, and you can look at the bottle and it'll say active ingredient, 1% or 2%, and then the rest of it is this inert, hopefully inert carrier. And that's kind of, they're telling you, look, we're giving you 2% of this really good stuff. It's going to do the thing, but we need, the pill is going to take at least a gram of product to be able to carry it. And that's kind of how that works. So if you were to take an isolate based, you may or may not get enough product, or you may or may not, it may or may not do exactly what you want. One of the curious things about CBD specifically is that CBD in a low dose is a stimulant. And at a higher dose, it becomes a sedative.
Okay.
But there is no correlation between weight or size or body mass. So what is a high dose, what is a low dose for you could put me, could zap me out, and vice versa. So
Gotcha.
it's hard to say, oh my God, 50 milligrams of CBD, that's a high dose. Well, it may not be for you. And so you may take 50 milligrams, even if it has melatonin or something else. And it, like you said, it does the opposite. It's a stimulant. It's like, it's keeping me up all night.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So are there any clear definitions of what is considered a low dose and a high dose, so that people know what to look for based on I guess the best way to do it is, if you weigh 150 pounds, what would be, a high dose that would be beneficial for somebody at 150 pounds to fall asleep, as opposed to somebody that's 250.
Correct. And so they are working on something like that. And of course, that would be the perfect goal, where they said, okay, this amount, 10 milligrams correlates per 20 pounds of weight. And then you could kind of figure it out. Unfortunately, that's not the way it works. And I'm not sure they will ever be able to get to something like that. I mean, they could possibly, by trial and error and anecdotal, make some type of guideline, but eventually you're going to still have a lot of outliers where people are, people are going to need to go specifically to a doctor or to a cannabis coach and say, look, it's Ruben, the package says that it's 50 milligrams per gummy, and I'm chewing 3 of these things and nothing's happening. And I'm like, okay, well, let's look at what is going on, because it could be other factors and such as that. It could be the product is not good. Like, I hate to say it, but because of we're dealing with an unregulated market. It's been found out. There's many news reports where they said we bought these 12 products and we sent them to the labs, and lo and behold, 2 of them actually have what they claim, and the rest of them are just sugar.
Yeah.
So that happens.
Yeah, I'm guessing that it does. So what would be considered, do you know what would be even considered a high dose at this point?
No, I don't. So
There is, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can tell you that children or people with epilepsy that take CBD, because it's been shown to be a really good anticonvulsant, can take thousands of milligrams because that's what they need. And then I've had people tell me 10 milligrams is all I need, and it puts me to sleep every day. I'm like, okay. So it just kind of depends on what the body needs and what it's missing.
Okay. So you're thinking that, so let me ask you this. So these gummies that I basically put in a shelf somewhere, and there's probably maybe 3 or 4 things of gummies. I think there's like 50 gummies or whatever they had in them. And I just put them away and forgot about them. But are you suggesting that if I take those out and take, rather than the 2 that I took, take maybe 4 or 6, I might get a different experience? That would be a high dose for me where it could be potentially effective?
Yes. So some people have what's called a long runway, and some people have a short runway. And by that, I mean, like, your sleeping process may start 2-3 hours before you you actually fall asleep.
Mhm.
Whereas some people, can just like, as soon as they pull the covers up, they're like 15 minutes later, I'm like, I hear snoring. I'm like, how does that happen?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And so it's just a matter of finding out what it is, like what your runway is. And
Mhm.
I know that when I was taking my classes, my teacher gave a scenario. She's like, I was helping this gentleman who swore he hadn't had 8 hours of sleep in over 20 years.
Mhm.
And she's like, we started him with 50 milligrams and we went to 100 milligrams and then 125, 150 a night. And she's like, we finally figured it out. And it's like, he started literally 2.5 hours. Like he would start with dinner, he would pop in a gummy. And then like 2 hours later, he would pop in another gummy. And then he would take a couple of drops of oil and then he would go to bed. And then on the side of his nightstand, he had a vape pen in case he woke up in the middle of the night.
Hmm.
And that's like literally the runway was that long. And she's like, he has since tapered off as his body is adjusted and his body has learned to basically how to with a little bit of behavioral therapy. And I know that sometimes people say, well, like, what's that like? I'm like some people can't stay off their cell phones, right? They like, you need that stimuli. So it's like, okay, you can't, you have to put your cell phone in another room. It's like, that's just the way it is. You can't sleep with your, because every little, turn off all the lights, get the blackout curtains. So there is some of that needs to be done. But like I said, that runway is something that was probably built over the 20 years of his life, right? He just like, there was always something that he needed to do. And that's just life, whether it's the kids or a job or whatever, that he was always worrying about not being able to sleep. And so that caused that huge runway. And you're not going to undo that, even with super duper CBD or cannabis or whatever, in just 24 hours. It's
Sure.
just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's definitely a process. My
Yeah.
my next question is like, so for these gummies that I bought for sleep, if I took two, they seemed to really amp my mind up and I couldn't sleep at all. So they
Correct. So
had the
that,
reverse effect. So here's my question. So for people that have that experience and you're saying, okay, maybe it wasn't the high dose. That was definitely a low dose for you. But see, what happens for me as soon as I have the opposite effect of what I buy a product for, and it actually keeps me up all night, then I
right.
want nothing to do with it, right? Because it's like so, but my question is, with those that have kept me up all night with only two gummies, if I did take six, could it have an opposite effect? Or would you say to people that have had that experience to avoid that product because they seem to have amplified your something in your brain where you couldn't shut it off?
Correct. So I mean, once you bought it, since you can't send them back, there's no harm in trying to like, okay, let's start out with three, let's start out with four. Let's see, like I said, like that example of that gentleman, let's lengthen the runway and see if I can get some use out of these things since I have them.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing obviously would be to do a little bit of research in the brand, but let's just assume that it's a quality brand and the what's on the labels, what's in the product.
Mm-hmm.
So then you would say, okay, yes, let's try to lengthen the runway. And like I said, this is where there is that need of a bridge between what the company can tell you, whether it's on their website or even if you were able to call somebody in customer service, they can't make medical claims. They really can't even explain. Like if you, as soon as you say I have insomnia, that is an actual medical condition. They can't say like this is going to help. They really
Sure.
can't.
Yeah.
If you just say I have trouble sleeping, well, that's a really general, and they can actually do something about that. But once you get to a medical claim, they have to shut it down. And so, like I said, this is where you need like somebody like myself that may not represent any one particular product, but can give you advice on how to properly take this new product and understand how it's working in the body, in the endocannabinoid system, to kind of explain to somebody like yourself. Because the first reaction, if I did that, would be exactly what you did. Is like, I bought this stuff and it didn't do squat.
Well,
Matter of
it's
fact,
the
it did the
opposite
opposite of
effect.
what. Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
did the opposite.
I mean, I couldn't sleep. It does something to my brain and I feel it. And it's just like, it's so amped up that there's nothing I can do to shut it off when I have tried some of these products. And it's just the absolute opposite of what I was hoping for.
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
And so that, I mean, that is also an explanation on why there's starting to be some research done on kids that have ADHD that are benefiting from low dosages of CBD. Because again, it acts like it's just really counterintuitive, right? Not the procedure, what do I want to say? The treatment for ADHD is to apply a stimulant, right? It's like Ritalin, that's what that is.
Yes.
And so you're seeing kids being by their parents, whether they're consulting a doctor or not, they're giving this to their kids and they're like, hey, it's working. I don't understand why, but it's working. I mean, I could explain why, but like that is the reason. And then the same thing when they give too much, they're like, oh my God, he's starting to fall asleep in class. I'm like, okay, bring down the dose. You've gone past the point, the bell curve. You're into diminishing returns now.
So Ruben, okay, so this is definitely helping people with, it's a stimulant that works for kids with ADHD, and it can help people with sleep. It just depends on what a high dose is for every individual, and that is something that each individual has to explore. From what I'm get. Did I hear you correctly?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. Now there is some things that can be done, or some other components to the situation that could be added, such as THC, like I said, and that's one of the reasons that I always promote a full spectrum, since it's going to have these minors, not enough to affect you, but enough to get things started. Sometimes the problem is getting to sleep, not necessarily sleeping. So once you fall asleep, like you're knocked out, but getting to sleep or staying asleep is the problem. So I don't know if you know that there's like 3 phases of sleep, right? So there's what's called light sleep, which is kind of what we do at the beginning. And that's when, like, if you hear a baby cry, if you hear some noise, you'll wake right up and like, be alert and ready to go. Then there is called deep sleep. And that is where the body is like basically paralyzed and comatose. Like that's where the body is down. So your brain is downloading, your body is healing itself. It's like, that's where, if you were to say like a computer, this is when all those night processes are happening, right? The computer is downloading everything it did. It's putting them in the correct files. This is where you build your long-term, like your memory. This is where you do your learning. So by all that stuff. And then the last phase, or the third phase, would be what's called REM sleep, and that's kind of where you're dreaming.
Okay.
Right? Okay. And what the goal of, like, when people say, well, I got good sleep, is that you want to have a good proportion between all 3 of those, right? The light sleep is still usually going to be the majority. So let's say you get in an 8 hours, you get 4 hours of light sleep, 2 hours of REM sleep, and 2 hours of deep sleep. So, and that is what you have. And people call that insomnia, or not, like, I'm not having the best sleep. It's like, if I could get another 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour of deep sleep, because maybe that's what you need. So in other words, if 2 hours wasn't enough to actually complete all the processes your body needed, so maybe your brain only downloaded 80%, and it's still trying to do that during the day while you're now loading up new stuff. And that's like when you basically, people go, God, I slept, but I feel tired. I don't like, I didn't do what it was supposed to do. And that's kind of, so if we take that back to CBD, what you want is CBD to help maybe move some of that light sleep, to borrow 15 minutes here and give you 15 minutes extra of REM sleep, or 15-20 minutes extra of deep sleep, to be able to finish the processing. And then you can reboot, and basically reboot in the morning, and you feel fresh and refreshed, and you go to go. What it doesn't do is it won't extend. So if your normal period of sleep is 8.5 hours, it's not going to give you 9 hours. That's not how it works. You're still only going to get the 8.5 hours, but the proportions are going to be different, which basically is what you need, and you get a restful outcome. Okay. And how that works is, and this includes probably the DMT and some of the other psychoactive drugs or medications, is something called the endocannabinoid system, which was discovered in the 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
And the easiest way to explain that is the endocannabinoid system is like the air traffic controller of all your automated systems. So your respiratory system, your circulatory system, your digestive system, your nervous system, your endocrine system. So everything that is kind of automatic is controlled by this one system called the endocannabinoid system.
Okay.
So if endo means internal, right? And cannabinoid is cannabis. It's so the body makes its own version of cannabis. Okay. And so when cannabis is what's called a phyto, so it's a plant-based cannabinoid. If you were to take, magic mushrooms, that has its own, not a cannabinoid, but whatever you want to call it, right? It's a chemical. And basically the only reason that works is because the body has a receptor for it, and the body also makes a version of that by itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes the body stops making it or doesn't make it in enough quantities for the body to consistently keep everything in check, right? It's a hormone imbalance, enzyme imbalance, protein, whatever you want to call it. So you need to ingest, like people that have a vitamin D deficiency, or people that are diabetic, that the pancreas doesn't make insulin. Like you have to bring it in some other way. And then if you do it right, then the system goes back to normal, to homeostasis, and everybody's happy, right? You can live a normal, fine life. You just take your insulin and everything is happy. If you happen to have, some foods that with too much sugar, then you compensate, you do the procedure and you're back to normal. So that's kind of that's what the endocannabinoid system does. Okay. And one of the things that CBD is really, really good at is addressing anxiety. So it doesn't have any properties per se that will make you sleep longer or change any of the proportions, like I was explaining, from light sleep to deep sleep to REM sleep. It doesn't do any of that. What it does is it's really good at down regulating. So maybe I need to explain this. So we walk around with open receptors ready to take in information. And CBD and THC go in there and turn off all these receptors. They literally turn them down.
Okay.
And I know I say that, and some people go, "Are you sure they don't just turn them on?" I'm like, no. So we walk around with open receptors. And the reason that is like if you had closed receptors and you put your hand on a hot stove, no information could get to those receptors because they're closed.
Mm-hmm.
So them being open, you immediately, oh, shit, that's hot. So you move your hand away. Okay, so that happens. And so one of the biggest things that we have found out is humans are walking around with too much cortisol. And cortisol is the chemical that is what you use for fight or flight, right?
Right.
So if you're at work and it's at work, or it's at school and it's midterm week, or you're about to do a presentation, your body's pumping in cortisol, because you're like nervous, anxious, and you're getting ready to do something. And what ends up happening is we've trained our bodies to make overabundance of cortisol. And it's been doing this maybe because you've been stressing about the midterm for a month and you've been studying in the same presentation. The presentation goes great, you do it, but the body is keyed to continue to make cortisol. And it's like it doesn't know where to go. So it's like it's in these receptors and it's keeping you up at night. And you're like, okay, stop. You're like, I'm done. The presentation was good. I did my job. I don't need this cortisol anymore. But the body doesn't know how to stop it. So you take some CBD and CBD goes in there and goes, well, we don't need these open receptors. Let's shut this down. And then the cortisol doesn't have anywhere to go. And they're like, hey, cortisol making machine down there, cool it. Like there's an overabundance. We don't even know what to do with this. So then you start lowering your anxiety because you don't have this extra cortisol, which as a side benefit, now you can start like relaxing and fall asleep easier.
Yeah.
And that's how that works.
Right. So the only thing that, like You know, I was an actor, and I've always dealt with performance anxiety and a lot of anxiety in my life. And so none of the gummies that I tried seemed to even calm me down either. So so I've heard a lot of people say it's good for anxiety. I've not had any success with finding or identifying a product that is. And maybe it's because that what you said initially in the opening, that because, you know, cannabis isn't legal in all states. I mean, medicinally it is, but there's not a full spectrum available, right? Because they have to only sell certain CBD products that are allowed to be sold in these states. So that it's going to have a really low dose of THC. So I guess my question is, for all the CBDs that I've tried, they've always been that below 3% mark.
Mhm.
So my question is, do you need a higher percentage of THC to be effective in helping people that deal with anxiety, or no?
Yes, for some people, they need more.
They do need more THC.
Yeah, yeah. And
Okay.
again, so this goes back to the somewhat higher, having a higher dose versus a low dose. Now, you can, I mean, if even with the 0.03, even with that tiny percent, if you take enough gummies, you're going to get to 1%.
Hmm.
It just like you may need to take 12 or 15, and you just keep adding the 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, and pretty soon you're like, hey, you're at 3/4 of a point, and now like you're almost at a point.
Gotcha.
um, that may not be, if it turns out that you finally find your dose, that's great. But like, you can't be like, I'm chewing 20 gummies a night. That's not going to be economically feasible, right?
Yeah.
So now you actually need to go to a dispensary that has maybe one gummy that will get you there.
Yeah.
But I mean, by the trial and error, you've actually gone and found your dose.
What is the level of THC in a typical gummy that isn't regulated by the government? So if you go to one of these dispensaries where they're above the 3%,
Mhm.
how high, what is the percentage typically in an average gummy?
So so I usually end up dealing with stuff that's like 1 to 1, maybe 1.5 to 1. The max is probably 2 to 1. So THC to CBD, and the majority of the stuff that you find in non-dispensaries is going to be way down there. It's not even going to be a percentage of 1 to 1.
Hmm.
And like you said, so you would need to take multiple gummies, and then they do have gummies that are 10, 15, 30 to 1. I just don't consider that's not medicinal. But like, I'm not trying to fool anybody by saying, hey, do this. This is medicinal. It's like, that's just a shot of whiskey. It's like, you drink enough whiskey, you're going to pass out. But I don't consider that sleep. You're
Yeah, no.
unconscious.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So
So
the same thing can happen with THC. You can take so much that you just like crash out, but that's not healthy sleep.
so Ruben, when you say 1 to 1, help us understand what that means. So for like a gummy, you buy a gummy, you're looking at it. Um, how many milligrams of CBD is typically? I don't even know. I can't even.
So a 1 to 1 gummy, let's just keep it at easy. So the math. So 10 milligrams is the entire gummy. 1 to 1 means it would be 5 milligrams of one and 5 milligrams of the other
Okay, of CBD and then 5 milligrams of
of THC.
THC. Now,
Correct.
is the milligrams, does that equate to the percentage or no?
Correct. Yes.
It does.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be 5% of THC
50%.
or 50%. So it's
For
way
for that
so,
for that particular piece, right?
okay. So when the government says you can't have THC over a 3%, and then you're saying 1 and 1 is 50%. I'm just kind of confused with this.
So it's 0.3% by dry weight. So
Okay.
you're taking, so in that, and this was for the plant, but
Mhm.
let's say you're taking a gummy and the gummy weighs, I don't know, half a gram.
Okay.
That dictates how much you can put on it, either in it or on it.
Gotcha.
If you get a bigger piece, like if you get a big piece of brownie that's kind of dense, then maybe you can load it up with 300 milligrams of you know, 150 milligrams of THC and 150 milligrams of CBD. I've seen it. And again, that's, you know, those are not necessarily meant to be either consumed by one person at one sitting. It would be like you cut it up into smaller pieces, but that's what you would have. It's by weight.
Okay.
That's how they determine that.
Gotcha. Okay. And then in your opinion, for people that, and again, anxiety is also a major issue across the globe, but especially in the United States. A lot of people suffer, and they're on a variety of medications, sometimes cocktails to just cope and get out of bed and go to work every day. What do they need to do to identify a product that could potentially help them with their anxiety, where they wouldn't have to continue to take pharmaceuticals? I mean, do they need to identify a full spectrum, and do they, and so that rather than just go to the over-the-counter stuff, would they need something? I mean, people that are really severely diagnosed and have been on meds for quite some time.
So yes, I would always recommend a full spectrum product, again, because so again, so how the medical pharmaceutical company addresses things is the more variables you put in the equation, the harder it is to track through the system, right? So they typically like to bring the product down to the one or two possibly active ingredients, and that's it. And the rest of it, they include things that are known either to be inert or just not matter, right? So they'll make a sugar pill, but they'll put the two ingredients that actually cause or do the effect. So that's how the medical community goes to it, right? And so you would have a pill for every particular symptom or product. Yes. So if you had anxiety, you would have a pill. If you have indigestion, you have a pill. You would have a pill for diarrhea, whatever the thing, because you're just dealing with each individual as a one or two molecule product.
Yes.
Full spectrum is kind of like it's already a cocktail, right? And it's giving you a cocktail and it's saying, look, the majority ingredient in here is CBD, and it's going to address the anxiety issue. And THC is going to be a catalyst to start off it's going to lower your inhibition and allow the CBD to take effect. Okay. But then there's other cannabinoids in there, CBC, CBN, and those are going to also have other effects. So part of the CBD is going to go into your digestive tract and try to calm down your stomach acids. And so you don't need a pill for that. You can get rid of that pill because the CBD is already going to take care of it. The CBD is also going to, because it's calming down your stomach acids, after a week, I love telling this story, but my wife doesn't like it. She's like, hey, after taking it for a few months, she's like, it didn't seem to be working, CBD, but now it works. And she goes, how I can tell? She's like, I didn't ever have a problem falling asleep. She goes, but what would happen is I would wake up at midnight, go to the bathroom, and then I couldn't fall asleep again for another hour. She goes, with CBD, I go to the bathroom, I wake up, no problem. I go, but then I fall back asleep in 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And she goes, after 3 months of doing this, and she was very happy. She goes, you know what? Another thing that was like, she goes, I don't know if like talking about, she's like, but I'm regular. And I'm like, I don't understand. She's like, I'm like having BMs every morning at the same time. And I'm like, that's another one of those things that nobody talks about, right? Mm-hmm. Until it becomes a problem. You don't go to the bathroom for 5 days, you're calling up the doctor.
Yeah, sure.
I need something. Yeah. So those are all things that have contributed along the way to her anxiety, right? It's like, again, you don't poop for 3 days, it's going to be an issue. And, it's causing your body to like twist and turn, and that's all causing you not to sleep correctly. So there's a lot of these things that are piled on, and CBD, or at least full spectrum, is literally a little bit of it goes to address everything at the same time. Mm-hmm. Now, unfortunately, the endocannabinoid system, or how CBD works, doesn't necessarily work or play like modern medicine does, where modern medicine, they give you the pill and they're like, this is going to be like a sniper. We're just going to give you this pill and it's going to shoot like a laser and address the one thing that's matter with you, whether it's inflammation or anxiety. It's not how it works. So you take CBD and it internalizes, and CBD goes into your endocannabinoid system and goes, all right, let's see, what are the blinking lights that are on? And there may be 10 blinking lights. And each of those things are associated with something. One is digestion, one is sleep, one is anxiety, one is inflammation, one is whatever. And you may think sleep is your number 2 priority. Like, I really have this backache, but number 2 is sleep. Unbeknownst to you, number 17 is actually the root cause, which is maybe you have internal inflammation, and CBD goes, well, shit, we got to take care of this internal inflammation first. Otherwise, I can put it all to sleep. And if I don't fix this, nothing's going to get better. And so you may be taking CBD for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and you're like, it's not really doing anything to like the sleep situation. And then little by little, it'll catch up as it starts to address. It's like it starts to flick off those lights. It starts to get to sleep. Now you also don't have any of those other underlying. It's kind of lowered your inflammation, lowered your anxiety. Now it can actually address sleep. And now it's like, man, but it really took a long time. But then, like my wife, it's like, hey, like that backache that I was talking about, that it was like before, that I thought, it's like it's starting to go away and I'm able to sleep. So that's kind of how it works. And it's not necessarily that sniper bullet that you can just say, I want sleep, I'm going to take it. And it's not like Ambien, which is just going to knock you out.
Gotcha.
That takes a little bit of explanation and a little bit of understanding so that you can temper your expectations, right? Otherwise, if somebody had told you, hey, I'm going to sell you these gummies, but it's going to take 2 weeks, that's quite a bit different than somebody saying, hey, take this and in a half an hour, you're going to feel better. Those are completely different. Like one, you're going to have patience. And like the other one is like, hey, they sold me this stuff and it's crap.
Yeah. So Ruben, for all the viewers watching, they're like going, okay, I got it down. I need to find a full spectrum. I need to find a full spectrum CBD and start exploring with that to reduce my anxiety levels and to sleep better. Where do they start? And what would a full spectrum CBD product look like in a little, jar, canister, whatever it comes in?
So the full spectrum, you're basically going to look for something that says full spectrum on it.
Okay.
You are going to request a COA, or a certificate of authenticity, or a certificate of a lab report, basically, and you're going to want to see that it probably the majority is going to say CBD. Then it's going to have maybe one other cannabinoid, and then THC is typically 3rd or 4th on the list, and then a bunch of little tiny percentages, 0.00 something of a couple of other cannabinoids. And then so that's what you're going to look for. And then it's just a matter of how you like to consume it.
Is there a milligram you should start off with?
And so, yeah, so at that point, you're going to purchase something, and it's going to be either, if it's in a 1 ounce tincture, it's going to be something like a 500 milligram. For the whole bottle, 1,000, 1,200, 2,000. I mean, you can just keep going up.
Okay.
And it just depends on what you're trying to address. So I typically, for an adult human, I typically say, look, you want to start at probably 1,000 milligrams for the bottle. So if you were to take a dropper full, which is 1 milligram, usually that's 100 milligrams of CBD for the 1 dropper. If you kind of just do the math.
Okay. Yeah, one of these.
You could do the breakdown.
One of these I have, I think it says 300 on that.
Okay, so that's really, really weak. So, but I mean, and I've gone so far as to tell somebody, look, what I want you to do is like take a dropper, fill it up, and then literally count how many drops you put back into the bottle. Okay, and then you can break it down. They're like, oh, I got 40 drops. I'm like, okay, now you can do the math. You just break it down. So you can say, oh, each drop is 2 milligrams. So then you can start, like I said, if you're really in pain or really need something, I always say, like there's some website that's literally say, start out with 2 drops and increase every day by 2 drops until you feel something. But like if you're suffering from pain or insomnia, it's like maybe you want to start with half a drop, maybe like why suffer for 4 days until you get to the dropper size? Look, let's just start with the dropper. If you're not feeling anything, then like you go with more until you start feeling something. And then I want you to go 1 day further. And if you feel better, then you just need to continue. If there's no improvement, then you've kind of hit your dose.
Gotcha.
And then it's a matter of like, once you figure out, it's like, well, I need to take 45 or I need to take 50 milligrams a day. I'm like, okay, so now you can decide, do you want to take it all at once? You want to take, what are you trying to address? If it's sleep, sometimes it's better to take it all at once. If it's pain or anxiety, maybe you need to spread it out during the day because you want a little bit of relief throughout the day, not just all at once. And so then you would say like, take 25 in the morning, take 25 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Things like that. And then, so that would be my recommendation. Then it's just a matter of like, whether you want to do it in an oil form, you want to do it as a gummy, you want to do it as a vape. Those are all just delivery methods.
Yeah. And I would think that the vape is probably the most, well, that can impact your lungs a little bit, correct or no?
A little bit. That's also the most instantaneous.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the quickest. So if it's the way it works is quick in, quick out. So a vape is going to affect you very quickly, but it's also the duration is going to be very short.
Yeah.
A gummy is going to take the longest to activate, and it's going to stay in your system the longest.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So yeah.
Okay.
So the longer it takes, because again, you have to think about this. So if you eat a gummy, before it gets in your blood system, it has to digest. And so and then under the tongue, you have a lot of mucous membrane. So it's pretty quick. But again, there's a limited amount that you can hold under your tongue, right? So you would have to, if you had somebody maybe like yourself that has to do a higher dose, may have to do multiple droppers over 15 minutes instead of just trying to jam them all in.
Gotcha.
Because again, there's only so much your tongue can absorb.
Sure.
And then the rest you're just going to swallow. So you need to spread it out.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So we need to identify a full spectrum product to put us to sleep, and then I need to explore. So their viewers need to I
highly recommend. Yeah, I always say is like, one of the best things you could do is just, take a journal and just say, literally, weigh yourself. When do you start? When do you go to sleep? Try to make the same thing over and over so that like, hey, I always go to sleep at 8:30 or what, one of those things so that you
Ruben, you're showing your age when you say I go to bed at 8:30.
I know. Especially right now that the time changed and it's getting dark. It's like, oh man, what's going on?
I know, man. I know. Well, yeah, Ruben Villasenor, thank you so much for sharing your expertise on this. Ruben is a cannabis coach, and we're going to post information on the podcast so that anybody that has an interest in needing guidance, they can reach out to you and find you.
That's what I do. Like I said, that's what I love. And I made clear that, like I said, that there is a need for this type of information to bridge the gap. And this has nothing to do with the fact that like CBD companies are not doing their job. Is just they're prohibited. And the same thing when you go into a dispensary, they can't really address this because you're talking to medical things. And so people are going, well, how are you addressing it? Well, I'm not, like, again, all this is just advice from experience.
Sure.
You have to do it. And I do get a lot of people telling me, it's like, well, I'm not going to tell my doctor. I'm like, no, please tell your doctor. I'm like, if your doctor is one of those doctors that doesn't believe in cannabis, maybe you want to get a different doctor.
Exactly.
But if you hide things from him, he can't help you. Or neither can the nurse, neither can the pharmacist. You need to be honest with them. And just explain that, look, doctor, I'm not asking for permission. I'm just informing you of what I am doing. I'm a grown man. I don't need you're okay to decide what I'm going to do, but you do need to know this is also part of my procedure protocol.
Sure. Yeah, I totally agree. Thanks for that. So Ruben, thanks so much, man. And,
You bet.
and thanks for doing this, and have a great rest of the evening over there.
You too.
And I'll talk to
Enjoy.
you soon.
All righty. Thank you.